Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming. So, everything is relative. How many of you would be willing to take an all-night shower of 58-degree water? The water that comes out of the earth, if it's fresh from the earth, it's like, that's supposedly the temperature, 58 degrees. It'd be horrible. But to a dahlia, it's like a hot bath when it's 32 degrees outside. So we have had 2 nights of watering the dahlias, so we get 1 more week, we think, of flowers. So these are Gary's special dahlias here, and so applause for the dahlias. And anyone that would like a hot 58-degree shower, just come on out and you can stand under the sprinklers all night. So last week was just a happenstance that one of my students I hadn't seen in 40 years stopped by, and so we hosted him and fed him and enjoyed visiting with him. And then he shared this story. Were some of you here, most of you? Quite a story of dealing with his job. He did his degree here and then went on to master's in music therapy, and had 30 years approximately at the mental institutions of Oregon as a state worker. And I just asked him, I said, well, did you have any special experiences? And just quickly reviewing, he said, well, I did have a patient, a client, that had gone basically catatonic. He had schizophrenia, and he got himself in trouble with the law, and it was very serious. And so that was either he was going to spend his life in prison or possibly in mental supervision, kind of. But he hadn't talked for 6 months. And so it was obviously group therapy, because you can't have therapy with somebody that won't talk, right? So this guy would just come and sit with the group under supervision, and then he would not say another thing. And so that was the end of that, until Dave played this song. And Dave's been a guitarist, even though he hadn't become a pianist till here. He played his guitar and sang this Cat in the Cradle song. And it's about a father who didn't have time for his son, and he's just singing the song for the group. And they're all listening, and they're all experiencing music like we all do. And then most of you were here, but some are new this week. So just a quick review, that he's playing the song, and he just looks around to people as he's singing, and a tear comes out of the corner of this guy's eye that's been catatonic essentially for 6 months, or just removed. And the song ended, and then this man said his first words, "That was my dad." Think of that. And that opened him up, and then they could start a kind of a therapy, and eventually he could present himself, because he had to be able to say yes or no, sir, to the judge, whether he would spend his life either on death row or in supervised mental care. And so he was given the privilege of life. And this music did it. And so I was asking a dear friend in Missoula years ago who was here studying harp, the thanatology harp, and she was playing not just for people who were dying, but also people who were healing or in some kind of need for music to come into their life. So families would hire Ruth, and she was playing, and she was hired to come and just play for an hour or 2 while the family could get some relief at the hospital. The mom was in a coma for some weeks or whatever period of time, and they'd say, if you can hear us, blink, move your eyelids, nothing. If you could squeeze our hand, if you can hear us, nothing. There was nothing. And so Ruth is playing the harp, and every now and then she'd just look over at the very calmly comatose mom, and that was it. And the family was out for shopping or some relief time. And they came back, but in the meantime, before they came back, she looked over, and then again, there was one tear came out of the mother's eye. And she thought, well, that's something. So the family came back, and about a week later, the mom came out of the coma and had life again. And so I don't know, maybe some of you each have stories. We can send them on like a chat box or something, but music is very powerful, and we know that. And so you're receiving it. And when we talk about these things, you don't even have to pay attention. You don't have to know any of what we talk about, but if something sticks or refreshes or kind of, I kind of get the gist, that's okay. That's just something. And we're going to touch on different styles today a bit, and we're going to go through some ideas that you've heard, and maybe you'll hear them in a new way. We talked the first week about how when you circle around to the same piece of information you've heard your whole life, it isn't the same, it's spiraling. Knowledge is always increasing as it ascends. So Barbie and I will each play music for you today, and this will be for you if you, at some point, you can just kind of keep it there, because I can't work too much here. And so we'll kind of go through. So you've all heard the saying, you know, the early bird gets the worm or something like that. Well, here's the deal. My brother, older brother, always very thoughtful guy. He always, you know, like had a response when Mom said, well, Pete, maybe you should get up 5 minutes earlier. You get your pig chores done, and then you'll make it to the bus on time. And then she'd say, well, the early bird gets the worm. And then Pete finally said to her one day, well, Mom, what if you're the worm? And you just get caught. So maybe sleeping in, you kind of avoid that whole problem. Anyway, that was Pete, and he's still a pretty thoughtful guy about fun things like that. So today, I hope this is going to work. Oh my gosh. There we go. So I'm going to play for you a beautiful Chopin nocturne. It's just one of my favorite pieces on this earth by Chopin. And so that'll come in just a little bit. And then Barbie, my two dear colleagues of recent performances here, she'll play for us a wonderful bagatelle and talk a little bit about that. And then we're going to segue, jump 100 years practically, to Debussy. And so we're going to kind of start scanning classical, romantic, impressionistic, and just things that kind of tie thoughts together. And maybe we get a little time. If we don't get time for every piece this week, we move it to next week. Next week, by the way, please save it. Save the date. So Friday night of next week, not this Friday, but a week from Friday in the evening, our pianissimo, the first one in 2 years, because we couldn't do it last year for a number of different reasons. So it's, you know, reviving this year. Pianissimo is 5 pianos, the 2 grands and 3 very good quality vertical pianos. So 5 pianos, and Chris Hahn's going to tell you all about it. He'll be here next week to kind of remind you that it's coming Friday night and Saturday night. And then Sunday afternoon, we have something called poco. It means little pianissimo. And so on Sunday afternoon, there'll be a children's concert, like 45 minutes without intermission type thing. So if you have grandkids or neighbors have kids that want to come to the Sunday deal, that's a really great thing as well. So this is some of our music. Now here, if this works, I want to share with you the idea of, here's the idea of the worm, okay? This was the second trip that Robin made to the lawn, and so that early worm got caught. So you'll see. Wait. Here we go. She goes and she comes back. These are all you guys just eager to learn. It's great. And here's the worm, and that one little early bird gets the whole thing. Look at that. So that's it. So that's enough of that. So I'm thinking, you know how you can buy gummy bears? Well, you can also buy gummy worms. And so the earliest people to come here every week are Dick and Marcia. And so maybe they'll get a package of gummy worms for Halloween, because they've been our early birds. So thank you for that. Moving on, though, we're going to go into our Chopin Nocturne that is so beautiful. But before we do, today we're going to kind of focus on melody, harmony, and rhythm. If you're taking notes, it's melody, harmony, rhythm. And so they all affect music, and they're all interactive. You can't separate one from the other. And Barbie was telling you the first day when you played Bach, right? That even ever since, music has melody, harmony, and rhythm. And it all came into being in these years. So in Chopin, what I'm going to show you here with our not quite living color, and my clicker, here we go. So there are notes that fit with the harmony. The harmony is mostly in the left hand, but it's also outlined in the melody. And if you play just notes that fit with the harmony, and I'll just start in measure 3. Again, so these are all notes that fit with the chords. And here's your harmony, and there's rhythm. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And again, I'm just using notes from the chord. But Chopin knew better, and he said, well, if you use notes in between the notes of the chord, you get and instead of going, Barbie, you could point with the clicker or with the little red dot there. She can kind of join in, and if you hit the arrows, you end up switching the screen, so just use your pointer finger. That's why they call it a pointer, I guess. Or that's why they call this finger a pointer. Okay, so then, again, something like that. But it's not as deep as it would be. Maybe this is sometimes why some popular music only lasts a couple weeks on the chart and is gone forever, because it's not as deep. So what I'm going to be talking about is when you add dissonance, notes that aren't in harmony. But this one is. These two notes belong. Now here comes a sour note. And that sour note goes to the right note for just a moment, and then you get another sour grapes, grapefruit, and that note is totally wrong, but it's headed to the right note. Does that make a little bit of sense? And that dissonance in music is part of what makes it deep, and it's what makes you get a little tear in your eye sometimes. And it's what makes your heart. So as you listen to this piece, and there's many other things and areas we can talk about with this piece, but we'll use it in other pieces, the thoughts. But just think about where you feel this music as you're listening to it. Is it in your heart? Is it in your lungs? Is it in your head someplace? Is it just over your whole body? Is it melancholy? Is it loveliness? Is it sadness? Is it repose? A nocturne means a night piece. This is from Chopin's group of nocturnes, one of the most important and famous. So I will play the piece. We'll think a little bit, and then Barbie's going to move into the Beethoven and Debussy. Okay. So, thoughts about how it feels, what you experience. Nice word. It's just great music, yes.
What do you experience? It sounds to me like you have a very strong emotional attachment.
I do, yeah. I learned it when I was in college. I actually learned it on my own. I didn't even tell my teacher I was going to learn it. And then I played it for him. And then I got to play it for a concert artist, and he thought I could do better, which was true. And I said, that's why you are doing what you're doing, and I'm a student. But it's such a great piece. It's so soulful, in a way, for me. What else? Any thoughts?
Okay, I want to ask this from the first class. What's the size of your repertoire? How many pieces do you have completely internalized?
Well, probably a lot, but I'm going to play one today that I haven't played in 40 years. So we'll see how internalized it is. But there's a lot of pieces, right? We've learned pieces over our life. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't have all Beethoven sonatas. There was a guy who came here. He was from Italy, and he lived in Helena because he was brought over during the war, before the war, kind of to be safer in this country, because he had Catholic friends in Helena, the diocese, or however it's said. And he ended up teaching at Carroll College for a number of years, and he came here, and he could play all 32 Beethoven sonatas at age 80 from memory. He didn't do it here, but he did a full program of 4 Beethoven sonatas. And afterwards, we went together out to celebrate his beautiful playing and his just great artistry. And anyway, his humanity, you might say. And he said, you know, I missed some notes, but I think I missed not one measure. Can you believe that? 4 complete Beethoven sonatas in one program. So that's something like that. If it's internalized, it comes out of a different place than if you're trying to remember what the next note is, right? And I was telling you guys about this one day that they say this, and it's research. So they take research and they do electrical impulses of the brain. And where does the brain light up during a playing of a pianist who's a student at the college or something? And they find, well, here's the rhythm, and here's the melody, and here's the harmony, and here's the kind of the composite and things and whatever, and there are all these areas, and then they take somebody who's done it their whole life, and of course it's different, and what they kind of came up with, and I haven't studied the research enough. You can look it up and tell me I'm misinforming you, but the idea is that after so many hours of doing, then it moves into your primary language, and the only area that's lit up is your mother tongue. So then your fingers become your speech, kind of. And you can express your heart more than when I was a kid. They used to say, "Oh, are you playing by heart?" And that was a term, right, for playing without the music in front of you. And I think it's true when it moves into our hearts. Anyway, what else did anybody experience? Yeah.
It's interesting, but despite, or maybe because of the dissonance, I found it restful.
Restful. Well, it really is, and I think it's, you can imagine Chopin playing this himself. He did not like playing for 30 people even. That was not his nature, but he very privately, he could teach like crazy, and he could play for his friends in the salon, in French, the salons, and these were like the ante-rooms, so we would call it the formal living room kind of, and people would gather, and he would play for his friends, and they loved it, and they loved him, and he felt secure and loved, and vice versa. So the music just flowed out of his spirit. And this was one of those pieces. And so you'd be alone at night, or he would be, and he could play that, or he probably didn't. I don't even know. Well, how can we know? But maybe he played this piece over and over again, or maybe, well, I've done that, and I'll move on and I'll write something else, It's hard to know. But it was there. It's encoded. It's embedded in the music. And that whole idea of... Sorry. There's already repose in there, right? The dissonance becomes consonance at this moment. Wrong note, repose, repose. Now here's the ideas we've been talking. Here's anacrusic notes leading up to the height. Go to there. And that's a wrong note, but it doesn't sound wrong because it isn't. No note is wrong. And that's a long dissonance that resolves here. And that's a wrong note going to the right note. And here's a wrong note in the left hand going to a right note. So it's encoded, and it's not that you should listen to the Missoula Symphony and say, oh, wrong note, right note. You know, you're just receiving it, and you're experiencing it, and you're loving it, and you're transformed in some way. It transforms time. I can remember thinking as a farm boy, you know, I said, well, I can do nothing with these next 2 hours, or I could get better at playing the piano, you know, something like that. And that was my thing as a kid, you know. I loved the piano since I was 2. I could play by ear. And anyway, and Barbie also, right? We were ear players, so play by ear. I actually came up with a topic, and you take the word heart, play by H-E-A-R-T, and I thought of all the words hidden in heart. Well, there's ear, there's art, there's here, and then there's heart. Isn't that neat? I mean, not that I'm brilliant to come up with that because it was already in the word, but it made a good topic, playing the piano by ear and here and heart and art. And so maybe that's the next year's Molly course. Anyway, so now Barbie's going to share with you beautiful. Bagatelle is a title of a piece, but bagatelle just means a little trifle. So it's a trifle by Beethoven, and she'll tell you a little bit about it, but I also want to share that when Beethoven wrote these bagatelles in his early to developing career, a set of 7 pieces, these were the startup of something that became the heart of Romanticism, which was pieces that have a character. Now, we talked about the doctrine of affections in Baroque, where you have a certain emotion or character that goes all the way through that prelude, all the way through that fugue, all the way through each movement of a suite. Those were ideas, and you don't have to remember it. If it strikes a chord, just remember the idea of it. And then by the time of Beethoven, we were having these contrasting moods. So you'd have your opening theme, and then you'd have a contrasting theme. And so the world of music was changing because of their view of the world culture, you might say, and just evolution of music, because it can't stay the same forever. We can't all write like Mozart for each generation, because that wouldn't be as interesting. So a bagatelle, which is a trifle, is now in character with little contrasting themes and keys, and it's just a lovely little piece. And that means when you have character pieces by Brahms and in a way, that nocturne is a character piece also, but it's just so extended, beautiful, contrasting. Okay, Barbie's going to tell you things. Here. Yeah. Oh. Here you go. Keep it close.
Okay, can you hear me now? Okay. One thing I want to contrast with Steve's beautiful nocturne. Oh, put it back.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
You see underneath the very first note, you'll see PED. PED stands for pedal. And as the Romantic era came to be, people used a lot of pedal with Brahms, with all of the other composers, and Liszt. And that was a way of sustaining the notes in the chord, because you've got a long ways from here to here, so there's no way you can connect them. But if you put the pedal on, it connects them.
So if Mozart had written this, he would have gone.
Exactly. And I was going to compare that to the bagatelle.
Yeah, and so here
because
comes
the bagatelle. Now, just look at the first 6 notes, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You're reaching. Okay, now I'll just play the first 6 notes of the bagatelle.
And this was.
He holds the bottom F. That's only an octave, because you can reach an octave 8 notes with one hand. That's an octave. So he holds the bottom one down, and that sort of gives the harmony a connective feeling. just like you had. Because in the early classical music and Baroque, they didn't have pedal markings as such in the keyboard music. So, so if you wanted to connect something, you sort of had to do like they do on the organ. You had to be able to connect them with connecting your fingers one to the other. So the pedal was quite an amazing invention for the piano. It allowed harmonies to be blended much more easily.
Sometimes that accompaniment in the Chopin is called extended Alberti bass,
Yeah.
kind of. Alberti bass is what you hear a lot with Mozart. Da 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 da. And that was named after a guy named Alberti. Okay.
So could you turn the page?
Sure.
I have just one page.
Cute little piece by a cute little pianist. Who could be cuter? Well, Michelle's backstage. Yep, got it.
Beethoven's bagatelles are totally
There, just. Yeah.
gems. They're fantastic pieces. And so if any of you play the piano, get the bagatelles. Beethoven bagatelles, you'll love them. They are so fun, and
So-
they're beautiful.
So what kind of, just quickly, some thoughts, what you experienced in hearing that adjective for the mood or whatever, yeah?
See, like Beethoven and Bartok is the life of the party.
Yes. Well, what about me? No. The death, perhaps.
But you can see the development from the, Beethoven was bridging into the Romantic period. He's sort of viewed as, among composers, sort of one of the main bridges between classical style and, the classical style and the Romantic, as illustrated by the Nocturne.
Yes, they say of Beethoven that he both filled the form that was already coming to him and extended and broke the mold.
Yeah, and he used the pedal a little bit. I think
Oh, yeah.
He had the pedal, yeah. In some of his sonatas, the huge sonatas, you have to have the pedal to play those sonatas.
Okay, so we got life of the party going there.
So now I'll sit down.
Let's continue with the party. So we now jump 106 years, exactly. Beethoven born into classicism and developing romantic traits that transferred then by osmosis almost to...
1802 was the bagatelle.
Yeah, right, 1802 and then 1906. So you're going to play again right now. Don't go away too far. The party continues, and you're the life. Okay, so this is number 3 in F major, and you'll enjoy, and this is the score, actually. It's in the public domain now, so you did, I know. But now and that's at home, you get to listen to Sviatoslav Richter. And now you get to hear Debussy, and Barbie will tell you, born into full-fledged Romanticism, but developing Impressionism alongside late Romanticism. It's not like one thing ended and the next thing started and then everything's finished. It's always going on. So here we go.
Okay, so now we're jumping from 1802, Beethoven's Bagatelle, to 1908, Debussy's Children's Corner Suite that was dedicated to his 3-year-old daughter. And he dedicated it to her apologetically, which I thought was quite emotionally interesting. She was only 3 years old, and he used as the subject for his pieces the toys that she had. And so this one is the Serenade of the Doll. She had a porcelain doll. And Impressionistic music, there was a kind of painting called pointillism, and it was like dots, like painting a picture with one dot at a time. And Debussy uses a lot of staccato, sort of short notes that remind me of painting a picture with dots, because a staccato note is sort of a dot. It's a dot above the note, and it's played usually short or almost short. You can sort of have it half short. But, so do you have a picture of that?
I did, I showed that, yeah, while they were, but you can go back.
So this is an example of painting with point, and you can see the dots.
So I'm adding some dots, you see?
So that's the porcelain doll over there with the dots, and you'll hear the sort of the shortness of some of the notes in this Serenade of the Doll.
And then they create the mood that you're going to receive. So you'll hear almost a childlike innocence in the music, I think. By the way, this is I think this is the first edition on the left. It's this, yeah. You look at it at home. Okay.
Some people play that piece a lot faster. But I like to play it slower because I feel that it brings out the harmonies better and you can make the staccato notes more pointed. And pointillism, there was another word that they used called stipple, and stipple is the dot that they paint on the picture. And it's a word you can use as an alternative to pointillism. Stippling was using one dot at a time to make a painting. And they would use pure colors. They wouldn't mix any of the colors. And so that's how they got that brilliant red. The dots are red. Now the next piece is the snow is dancing, and you can see the snow right in the other picture. I mean, he's by the ocean, so maybe it's not snow. I mean,
It's coming, though, soon.
but we'll pretend it is. Okay, so this is the snow is dancing, and you'll hear the same sort of pointedness on the staccato notes. If a note on the music has a dot above it, it's called staccato, and it means short, so you play it short. As opposed to legato, which you play in the nocturne, but
Right.
you connect the notes.
Is that alliteration, when the word like shush, kind of
Legato, staccato.
staccato, very pointed word. So share a little bit afterwards the character or mood a little bit, because we're still in character. Mm-hmm.
pointillism, staccato in music, pointillism in painting, the dots.
So, Spirit, does it make sense that these were written by a great composer for their child, for a kid? What would feel that way, in a way, rather than a mature, kind of soulful piece for the adult audience? Anything that comes to mind?
One was playful, and this one I felt the movement, it felt blustery to me. I felt like I could see a storm with
Yeah.
the movement.
Nice.
And maybe the title pointed me that way, but that was the feeling I had throughout this second.
The second of the two Debussy pieces.
The first one I thought was playful.
Okay. The playing with the doll, and a serenade to the doll, singing to the doll, maybe. Okay. Anything else? Some thoughts? Yeah.
What's the difference between telling an adult story
Kind of reading it in a childlike frame. And we are, when we make music, we're in time. It's called a temporal art, right? Music is a temporal art. A painting you can look at, you can go back to it, it never changes, but your experience might change with your relationship to that painting. But it's always there. And the music is always there and printed, right? But it's not real until it's realized, until it's performed. So music exists only in time. A dear friend in Spokane, who was one of the nation's great teachers, quoted somebody else probably, but the essence of the quote was, "Music is painted on the canvas of time." Sound painted on the canvas of time. It's a beautiful thought. Yeah, please.
Can you hear me? I just wanted to say something that's sad about Debussy is that shortly after he wrote this piece, he got colon cancer. And it wasn't diagnosed, they didn't know what it was, but he was having excruciating pain and problem after problem after problem, and so he would take morphine and what's that other one they take? Some drugs. Any case, so that would help him, but it would make him unable to compose music because he would be in a stupor. And so he suffered with that for, I think, about 8 years, and then he died. There was no survival rate if you had colon cancer at that time in history. And then the other sad thing is that his daughter, 1 year after Debussy died, she got diphtheria and died, and she was only 13 years old. So diphtheria was on the verge of getting the vaccine, but not yet. They had made some discoveries. But just to show you how troubled some of these lives were of these composers, Beethoven, of course, went deaf, totally deaf. But he was composing great music the whole time. And so I just thought I would bring that up because it gives some humanity to the real lives of these people who lived. And it's fascinating to read about them. Debussy was admitted to the Paris Conservatory of Music when he was 10, and he showed great talent, but he kept going off on breaking all the rules, and his teachers were quite mystified as to if he was doing well or not doing well, because he wasn't following the rules. So you can see that all through his life. And Debussy loved Chopin, he loved Liszt, he didn't like Wagner, and he became a critic, and some of his criticisms are very interesting to read. But, so I just thought I would bring that up.
Thank you. So wonderful to have Barbie as part of this class. Every year she says, "Oh, I love to make music, I love to play. I'm just so happy to help out." And so applause for Barbie, and thank you. So we're going to do a little bit of a review, but also for a reason. So we talked about melody. Barbie was talking in the first class about, let's see. Right? So bum ba da 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 dum bum bum becomes a recognizable rhythm, and it pervaded that Bach fugue. So rhythm is also incredibly important as part of the fabric of music, or the texture, or the tapestry, if you will. And we can't go into the one semester theory course here exactly, but if you take the notes of a scale over here, can you see that I'm just using that little arrow to point over here? Whoops, better be careful about that. I'll use the pointer. And so then you can also build a chord on each note of that scale. So the C gets a chord, and the D, that's a note D, and that gets a chord, and E gets a chord. And so they're either major or they're minor or they're something. And then they started adding, and Bach was doing this, it was always happening, and Rameau writes about this in 1722. So here's the triad. It's called triad because tricycle has 3 wheels and a triad has 3 notes. And you can play them sequentially, or you can play harmonically. That creates a harmony. So here's C major, here's D minor, here's E minor, here's F major, here's G, there, the triad, G major, A minor, and this has a little different quality. It's called diminished, and then you get back, that will take us back to Do, and you have Do, Re, Mi, Fa, Sol, La, Ti, Do underneath here, and this is your little take-home theory lesson, and then you can start adding notes. This is the interval of a third, because here's the interval of a second. C and D, but C and E. 1, 2, 3, the third note, and then here comes the fifth note. 1, 3, and 5 make C major. And down here, 1, the first note, the third note, and the fifth note, the seventh note, makes what's called a seventh chord, because you're adding a new note to the mix, and you get 4 notes. But you can also go 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, and I'm not showing that yet, and there's 11, 13, and then you're back home. So every note of the scale, instead of playing them all like this, you can play them like this. And it opens up and it starts spreading out. And so you get this beautiful sound. And Debussy loved those sounds. So in theory, music theory, he'd stay after class and he'd start going and just finding and exploring sound. And why does that chord have to go to a different chord? Why can't it just be pretty all by itself? And so that's kind of an idea. And so then Ravel came in, and the two of them together, French composers, sorry, my clicker remained there for some reason, is here's a chord chart. And you don't have to go home and memorize it. But the green one up here, the green one, it's not green today very much, it's just living color. And this chord up here is the one that I just played. And then if you go, sorry, this is actually, that's got to be flat, and you don't have to know all this. So this is a quality. And this chord usually goes there, that green one up there. But this one down here is a little bit different. Instead of this, he does this. And that starts to be something that becomes jazz in part, and it just sounds ugly in a way, but if you receive it in an open-minded way, it's a pretty color. And so I'm going to play a piece for you that starts, and that's part of this chord. Here's the normal note. And if you take away some of the notes and you left those, that's what you get. But it's called a sharp ninth. 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. Here's normal ninth is this. 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. And this is a sharp 9. And if you add that, using all those notes, but you take away the bottom and do the others, and then you add. And Debussy loved just the beauty of the sound, so that one goes to that one. So harmony begins to expand in this time. And why not? I mean, yes, the Romantics did some of those chords, but but it was more incidental, and now it becomes a whole color unto itself. And I thought, given the flowers and given the freezing temperatures of the last 2 nights, the name of this piece I'm going to play for you is called Dead Leaves. And the very last notes of what do leaves do after they die? They sit on the ground, and of course, they become next year's nutrients, so they decay. So at the very end of this short prelude, which is not for children exactly, but they can listen as well, and then you get this, and you get. And then you let go of some notes, and all that's left is this little memory of a leaf the sound is decaying, like the leaves decay. Does that make sense a little bit? It's not meant to depict. In fact, the titles of Debussy wrote 24 preludes, Chopin wrote 24 preludes, Bach wrote 48 preludes in the 2 books of 24 preludes and fugues. And so the prelude became a piece unto itself, and that's part of the beauty of how music gets suggested by previous generations. So I'm going to play this piece for you called Dead Leaves, or Feuilles Mortes, and quite beautiful. I'm going to back up so you see at least the first page of it. And again, you don't have to know all this music theory, but those green little marks are the first 3 chords that are, you start, this was memorized, and it's kind of, but not mattering. And then, so that sound is just beautiful if you just accept it. Could be a lullaby. Okay, so here is Dead Leaves. So what's your takeaway from that? Different sounds, different organization of sound. Is it mood? Is it painting on the canvas of time with sound? Anything? Feedback?
Well, you can just hear a flutter, going on the title.
Mm-hmm.
You can just hear, because leaves and fall are beautiful,
Mm-hmm.
but they are fluttering to their death.
Oh.
So you could
Or they're adding to the composition of the earth. Yeah, but you're right. They've done their.
anticipation, and then maybe there's a subtleness and nothing is happening because there's a rest in the leaves or the wind.
Mm-hmm.
Then it rushes up and it happens.
There's a place for me that suggests if you think, and there is a kind of a book about landscaping of these pieces, and this one is, and he says slow and melancholy in his directions. So, and then somewhere it's about a scape of desolation, kind of. I have a little painting that one person who works with these pieces chose, and this is dead leaves in the frost. We had frost this morning, but the 58-degree water kept the dahlias alive for one more week. And you have, so I'm going to get to the little story part for me, but here, I just think those are so pretty. And then, this little, so that rhythm, da 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 da, and then you have da 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 da, and here comes I don't know what. Something's lurking. And then you have kind of a little melody hidden in all these. And then here it comes for me. For me, if this were orchestrated, this would be horns. Like a fanfare, or maybe it's a hunt, when they're hunting and their horses, and it's autumn and it's hunting season, and you have da-da-da-da, let's go to the hunt. And then this little rhythm, da-da-da, that one, gets slowed down to this. Instead of ba-ba-ba-ba, goes bum, slowing down. And then this little rhythm that we heard, this becomes. So there are melodies hidden in there, kind of, but then you get at the end. We come back to that opening idea, and then we get the horns that you hear, ta da da da, become pom pom pom, slowed down, and then you get a very open. And then it ends in a beautiful, like the Notre Dame organ came on in the beautiful C sharp major. Not, but just, and then the decay, and it's over. But maybe a little hunt in there in the middle. There's activity. There's always something of interest. So you don't have to even know a piece to sort of hear repetitive rhythms or some kind of chord quality or just a beautiful little melody that's wafting through. And so this music is very layered. And the word, some of you are taking notes. Yeah, go ahead. The word that you could write down is organic. Not like no pesticides, but organic like an organism is all unified. So the music grows out of itself. And it's almost like an improvisation written down that the composer said, well, where can I go from here? Well, I can go, Well, I'll just move that to here, and I'll give a little bass line, and that suggests this note leads to this. And this goes here, and now and then a little idea. And now he goes to a different harmony. And let's do something with those. And this, let's add a layer. And then this really rich jazzy harmony. This is every note of, but with a sharp ninth. But he spreads it out even more to these notes. And you probably think, call the piano tuner, something's wrong. But it's not. And then here's that little tune. And here comes the little desolate hunt. Let us go hunting, let us go. Something's trudging. So there isn't a single thing that isn't professionally, musically sophisticated, connecting to the next thing. The connective tissue is amazing in this genius writing. It's not just my little student. I showed some of you last week my little 5-year-old song, right? And I think that's when my parents decided, because I was playing by ear, I hadn't had piano lessons yet, and I think it's time for piano lessons before it's too late. And so, yeah, Herb, you were going to say. Well, the Children's Corner, I mean, that's a special genre where he could have written it any time, but that was 1902 and 6 and 8, 6 to 8, published in it, and this is 1910. No, this is the second book, 1913. We don't know exactly when he wrote it, but he sent 12 pieces to the publisher at one time, so it's in that batch of 1913. Clair de Lune was 1890. I played that the first class that you go back to your YouTube and you can listen to any number. Yeah, what else? Yeah, please.
When he wrote this, he was obviously already suffering with his colon cancer.
True.
And I saw in this an intimation of his own mortality.
Whoa. Wow.
I think that some of the chords and the chord impressions for me suggested he knew
His end was coming. I mean, he survived it for 8 years, right? But in misery, there were stages, as we know.
I mean, they couldn't diagnose it right away. I mean, they didn't know much about it at that time.
Yeah, you're a doctor, as you would know all these things. But maybe that is a little bit ominous, that little. Could be like the Dies Irae. So, by the way, how many of you know the famous? You'll hear it at homecoming probably. Who knows what this is? Right? What is that? It's Stars and Stripes Forever by Sousa. We call it Scars and Scrapes Forever, but Stars and Stripes. So I think you can research this and tell me if it's true, but that starts with the Dies Irae. The Gregorian chant used for death, right? And so Dies Irae. Why not? It's a part of life, so let's eat, drink, and be merry. Other thoughts on that piece, and I want to move on a little bit to some other things, but yeah, please, if you have some extra thoughts or questions. Should we go on? So here's your little landscape. You can listen to this played beautifully at home by another artist. So we are artists. We're all artists in one way or another. We have something to share. So this is your chord chart or your scales and your little music theory lesson. And here are the extended harmonies, and I just highlighted 2 of them. That yellow one is from a previous Mali course. The little yellow sticky note there, arrow, is a harmony that Ravel used verbatim in one of his pieces. And here is just something fun. Yeah, I thought we would enjoy this piece. So this is, so ragtime. So I don't know your name, but you were asking about how does classical music jive, let's call it, with jazz. And they really grow, everything grows out of something. And so the knowledge of music and music theory evolved in such a way that you would hear, maybe I'll prepare it for another week, but and who wrote it? This is your midterm. Scott Joplin. And he became the king of rag with that piece. And there's an apocryphal story I only learned, you know, in my little research that I never do quite enough of. But researching this, we were told long ago, you've heard it probably, this was the first piece of music to sell 1 million copies in the USA. But it's an apocryphal story, and the research shows that he actually had trouble even selling 400 copies in the first year, but it was a new piece, right? That was a lot. And he had if he didn't have an agent, at least he had some forethought that he should get something out of the deal. So he got 1% of each sale, and it amounted to something like 1.5 cents per copy that he would get. But it actually panned out that in later years when it really caught on, and maybe eventually there were 1 million copies sold, and now, you know, it continues. I don't know what his ancestors. Well, now the copyrights are off, so nobody gets anything. But at the time, he was always saying, do not play this not fast. He would say not fast. And think of it, okay, I am a piano player. Barbie is a piano player. How many of you are piano players? You don't have to be you know, you enjoy playing. And that's great. But then in the day, there were what? Before records, there were player pianos, right? So we were piano players, and then we got displaced by player pianos. And what could they do with the player piano? You could choose your tempo and say, oh, kids room. Well, that ruined the day for Joplin in a way, because you really want. And so now we get into the area of rhythm. So if you just take out those notes, they're what you call cross rhythms. So 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1 and a 3. And the 3 is an early 4 or something like that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So they're notes that go in between the beats, and they're off beats, or they're early beats, or they're late beats, and that's part of it, and that becomes something that gets used in jazz. So if you took the Debussy piece that I just played, and you sort of, someone say, well, can't you jazz it up a little bit? Well, I don't know if Debussy would, I wouldn't do that, but you could go sort of, ba-da-da-da, ba-da-da-da. One, two, three. In between the beat, 1, 2, and 3. Does that make a little bit of sense? And so you're wrecking the microphone. So you're changing the rhythms around. That's a huge part of what makes jazz kind of fun. And so people sort of leave in a jolly mood because they just feel it in their bones. And we owe the black population from Africa, unfortunate stories in between them and now, still. But these people had no notation at all, but they had their drums and their hollowed out logs and their instruments that they created, that they just lived the joy of music, just daily. And so, and Joplin's a black guy, and he was well trained, as my student David told you last week. Here. So let me unjazz that piece a little bit instead of jazzing up the Debussy. You could go. No, sorry, I jazzed it up. Sort of like putting all the notes back on the beat instead of in between the beats, and then you go back. But you have a timekeeper, and that's the left hand. Because if it's going to be off and in between the beats, you have to have some beats, right? Your heart is always beating, so. There's an early beat there. Not. So somewhere in, maybe I don't have it on this day. Let me check and see if yeah, there it is. So I wanted to show you last week, Marjorie played for you this In a Sentimental Mood, and I'm not sure I can read with this faded light bulb here. Bum, 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 bum. That's an unfortunate thing, so next week I'll probably play it for you after I can see it better. Or something like that instead of that. Things like that. Or at the bottom there, it says blues scale on D. So I heard a really neat NPR, one of those All Things Considered or Spotlight or some show. It was national. It was a national broadcast. And it was an interview with Wynton Marsalis. And he's a wonderful classical trumpet player and a great jazz player. And who's his brother? I can't think of the name of the... Which? Okay, Brandon? I'm sorry. Maybe time for a hearing aid. But anyway, so Renton or Ranton or Bradford. Okay, well, you got it. And so, so they were saying, how did the blues come to be? Well, the black people had plenty to be blue about, right? And so... And then if you go... something like that, you start having chords that have these sort of that. So. And people know way more about this than I do, but he was saying it all came out of why did the blues end with So the black people weren't allowed to have their own reading ability or a lot of abilities. They were suppressed in lots of ways during these times of slavery. but they could sing, and they could sing hymns, because then they were being Christianized and they were being civilized even, you could say, in a sort of a twisted kind of way. So they could embellish the Amen, and they go, the Amen became the 4-1 in the 12-bar blues. Does that make a little bit of sense, just as an idea? And so I'm going to play for you if we have time or not. Yeah, we do. I'll have to play it really slowly. We have more time. Time for questions maybe at the end, and thoughts. And some of you, raise your hand if you want to come out for a 58-degree shower or sprinkler in our sprinkler system. So this, so what happened in ragtime evolved. How many of you know the name novelty music? So novelty was something that evolved out of ragtime, and there's a fun little story that I'll verify between now and next week. Oops, how did we get to there? I'm going to go to the end here. Let me get my little arrow. Where's my arrow? There. And go. Okay. Just give me a moment. Okay, here. So this is 1935, and that's already establishing itself, and this you can go home and listen. I hope you are, some of you at least, and I hope maybe that won't sound because it was from last week. But this might. And this is a novelty piece, and that's what I'm going to play for you in a moment. So this is the recording, the old original Kitten on the Keys by the composer Zes Confrey. So what was happening in Chicago, and he lived Peru, maybe Illinois, he was just a very good pianist who could play ragtime really well. So he was hired by the Edison Company to come and do player roles, piano roles. And you get one chance for each role, right? There's punching kind of as you go. I don't know how that worked quite the process, but he was there making piano rolls, and so he'd be warming up before he had to play Scott Joplin's Athena rag that you heard David play last week, or the Maple Leaf rag. This was before the leaves died, before dead leaves. And this is Kitten on the Keys, and there's this place. And he was just warming up with these pieces that he made up at home, right? He hadn't even written them down. And something like that, and that's in the jazz rhythm. But it was in ragtime spirit. But it was different. It was beyond. It was evolving. And so somebody said, well, you should make a roll of that piece, and you should print it out, and people will buy it. And they did. So the two most famous pieces are Kitten on the Keys, which I'll play for you, and then Dizzy Fingers, which I'm actually working on. Right now I'm learning to make my fingers dizzy. So this is Kitten on the Keys, written down, and they became novelty pieces. They were novel. They were new. Novel means novelle. A novel is something new. So here we go with Kitten on the Keys. What is all that noise? Is that us? A lawnmower. I'm sure there's a piece for lawn mowing. Did you ever play Lightning and Thunder when you guys were kids? That was the thunder and lightning. Well, that's the end of today's class. Would you all join hands and see if you can locate the living? What? That's a favorite line, just in the... Okay, the lawnmower guys. So what I was going to tell you. He said purposely miss notes on that part because the kitten doesn't know how to hit the right notes. Isn't that funny? Okay, here we go.
So,
Oh, finally something you're enjoying. No. So I have this feeling that it would be fun if somebody said, would you play that for my funeral someday, you know? Because we should sort of celebrate that we're all part of something bigger and eternal. And anyway, so I had a former student who was really a voice major, but she was a good pianist. And she came back from Washington, D.C., where she had some kind of, I don't know, role in the chorus of the Washington, D.C. area opera or something like that. Very fine, beautiful singer. And her mom was in Hamilton and was passing of cancer in some stretched out way, so she came back to be with her mom. And they had a pretty, I mean, she, being the daughter, had this amazing sense of humor, but it came from somewhere. And so her mom said, do you think it'd be, Chrissy, I think was her nickname, would it be too difficult for you to sing something at my funeral? And she said, well, I think I could do it. And she, well, do you have something in mind? And she said, oh, I don't know. How about Ding Dong, the Witch is Dead? I don't think she actually did it, but I sort of love the spirit of the thing. But what a good-natured mom, for heaven's sakes. Okay, so thoughts, anything? We have 1 minute or something.
I think we're about wrapping up.
We're wrapping up. Oh, it is 10:31. Well, okay. I owe you 1 minute next time. Bring your questions, if you will. Anybody looked at a video or anything yet? Nothing? Yeah, one person. Well, I'm glad I'm having a video made. All right. Have a great week, and we'll see you next Tuesday.
Thank you so much,
Yeah.
Stephen. Yeah.